to Rubbin is Racing. I am your host, Mr. CJ Sports. Sorry about the few minute delay. I was hoping that my co-host was going to be able to join me tonight, and I was kind of holding out on him but hopefully everything's going all right with him. But and here we go, as we are live, and he is calling in right now. Steve, welcome to the show. How are you doing tonight?
Hey, I'm doing great, son. How about yourself?
Not too bad. Just getting the show kicked underway, and was trying to wait out on you, but the only thing you missed was just the introduction. So I didn't really miss too much, and I'm glad you joined me because after watching this last weekend's race, I have a lot of questions I have to ask you, and so I was really hoping that she was going to be here tonight because there's some things that I want to understand better when it comes to what we saw this last weekend's race. But how was your weekend, and did you enjoy what you got to see out of Las Vegas?
Well, my weekend was real good, and I saw a lot of yesterday's race. It was a pretty interesting race. The weather didn't really change as much to me as they were hyping it to do. It just seemed like to me none of the drivers were really having any problems with the wind, so it kind of became a non-factor.
Now speaking of the wind, because that wasn't even something I thought about, and even the whole weather, because it started off with a slight delay with the rain, and they had that big dust or sandstorm come blowing in, and it just looked really weird out there for a while. But more specifically, the wind. At what significant rate does it take for it to really affect the racing, and how often does it really affect the drivers when you talk about the winds?
Well, it's like fog, really. The closer to the ground you are, the clearer your visibility is. And even in fog or in smoke, if you get down low enough, you can get under it.
Yeah.
So, from where everybody was sitting and the TV cameras were positioned up high and everything, it looked bad, and I'm sure it was bad, but it wasn't anything to the drivers. They're down on the ground, and when it showed in-car camera shots, you could see it was a lot clearer from the driver's point of view, and people were asking, why doesn't NASCAR stop the race and everything? And the NASCAR tower's in touch with some of the drivers, how are things? And as long as NASCAR can see the backstretch, they're going to race. That's just the way it is. So, like I said, it was it was more of a factor for the fans than it was the drivers or anybody else.
I know that they kept talking about it a lot, so I wasn't sure, especially when it came to, I want to say Gordon, maybe it might even been Darrell Waltrip, constantly talking about the flagpole, looked like it was almost bending over, and so I didn't know if that affected them much, or if it was just Gordon and Darrell Waltrip just being them in the studio, which this whole combination and constantly rotating, I don't know how quite I feel about it, because I don't think at any one period Darrell Waltrip should be talking or Michael Waltrip should be talking. It should be amongst a group. And so when they keep going to these individual segments and letting them talk by themselves, I'm still not sure if I quite like that. I'd just rather everybody be together. But that's my personal opinion on that. But one of the big things that stuck out to me about this race, and I've been biting at the chops all day long wanting to know. It seemed like every green flag run or any run period, and I would say it's probably at least 10 or 15 laps after they changed tires, it always seemed that somebody had a vibration problem. What was so different about this weekend that we heard so many different drivers talk about vibration?
I think the majority of what I heard was loose wheels. That's what was causing the vibrations. And, this is what happens when you experiment, so to speak, with 4 lugs and 3 lugs. Not so much 4 lugs, but 3 lugs will definitely come back and bite you in the ass if you don't get them exactly tight. And a lot of times, just the stress of the wheel cornering will affect that a lot of times. So it's kind of a tough deal, you know. Is it worth losing a few tenths of a second or a couple of seconds in the pits to put that extra lug nut on? Or do you take a chance, and if it doesn't work, it's going to cost you a lap or so? So if it was me, if I was on the box, I'd be doing 5. That's just the way it is. I might do 4 for a late race tire change, but other than that, I'm going with 5 because over the years, the car manufacturers have all put 5 lug nuts on a wheel, so you would think that would be the way to go, and that's the way I'd go with it.
It just seemed like this weekend it was a more common thing than we had been used to hearing. It just didn't seem like there was that many cars that we seen this issue with, and so it was really odd to me. And you're talking about going 5 and then possibly doing a 4 later on in the race, and you're talking about some of these teams doing 3 and 4. How hard is it for them to me, I would assume that changing a tire is kind of one of those things you get a rhythm and you kind of, you know, have your way. And so how difficult is it to change your habits and not try to gun for that 4th one if you went to a 3, you know, trying to speed up things? Does that throw things off? I mean, I would think that I would naturally react, especially if I'm changing tires 4 or 5 times a day every weekend and then practicing every weekend. If, you know, they're trying to save time, make up maybe a gamble late in the race and you know, try to shorten the pit stop to gain a little bit of track position. I just think that would kind of throw you out of sync.
Yeah, it does, but it's really just a case of cutting the pit stop off early if you're the tire changer by only tightening 4 and knowing that you've only got 4 the next pit stop, so you don't overgun the lug nuts, so to say. But it's all based on rhythm. It's all, if you watch them, they go step by step by step by step. And the tire changer, it's like take lug nuts off and watch while the tire carrier hangs your new wheel on there, get the lug nuts tight, and get the hell back over the wall. It's a lot of rhythm to it. It's programmed out step by step. The coaches they have running the pit stops and stuff, they spend a lot of time looking for ways to shorten the stop. So it's a little bit more of a process than what you see from television on pit road. And if you know, next race, when they start showing pit stops and stuff, watch the right front tire changer. You can see his elbows and everything. And it's not hard to count as he goes around in a circle inside that wheel how many times he jams that gun in to tighten the lug nut. And you can see a lot of them do 4 pretty much as a standard practice.
Now, one of the gambles this weekend that we saw was the 2 tire change. And some teams lucked out with pit stops or with caution coming out about the time that they started to fall off, because they fell off obviously quicker than the 4th tire change. And then some of them didn't get so lucky. I think Denny Hamlin was the first one to gamble. And yes, he got out front and he held on for a little while. I want to say 10, 15 laps or maybe a little bit longer than that. Then he started to fade back and then started to get passed by everybody. How tough, one, as a driver, is it to have your crew chief make that kind of decision, and especially after watching Denny Hamlin not be so successful and be happy and content and not lose your cool, like we listened to Austin Dillon, which had nothing to do with the tire, but we listened to him lose his cool over the radio. And then two, how hard is it for a crew chief to make that decision, especially once you've seen the first car not have quite the success? Obviously you're hoping that the cautions come out and it all plays in your favor, but there's also a chance that doesn't, and now you put your driver in a position that eventually he's going to have to play makeup.
Yeah, it's a tough call to make, but Denny Hamlin tried it perfect. Early in the race, if the move backfires, you got time to make up what you're losing.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's the right time to do it, and I'm sure that doing that run, all the engineers and all the crew chiefs noted that he could hold them off for about 10 laps or so, and then once their tires got up to temperature and their grip increased, they just started marching by him. So from that, as a crew chief, I would have taken, well, if we get a caution 10 laps from the end and It's been a long green run and we know others are going to take 4, now would be a good time to take 2 and get track position and then make your car, 50 feet wide so nobody can get back around you. So that's what you're hoping for, but a lot of times you end up in situations like Kyle Busch, who the last pit stop from the end, he only took 2 left side tires. And then sure enough, later in the run, he was complaining that his right front tire wasn't working. He wasn't planting it, wasn't getting any grip out of it, and it was causing his car to tighten up. And Keselowski with 4 tires. I realized it was a while in the run, but still, 4 tires on a track like that is probably the best way to go. And Kyle Busch didn't, and it kind of came back to haunt him, I think. He fell from the lead to 4th there at the end, and I'm pretty much convinced it was because he only took 2 left side tires, and that was it. And if you're a crew chief, you're always thinking, when the caution comes out, then you're sitting there thinking, well, this is the last caution of the race. So what am I going to do? How am I going to end the race? And they think the same thing, from the competition caution. They're pitting in, and the crew chiefs are thinking, well, this is going to be the only caution we get. What do I need to do? So you're constantly, as a crew chief, thinking about stuff like that and calculating it into what your plans are. And for the good ones, it works out okay.
And honestly, when I was watching it, after we saw how Hamlin performed, I figured we might see 1 or 2 other cars just test it and others get information, and then we wouldn't see it again until, in case we got a late race caution that, that 15, 20 laps from the end run, that you get your car out in that clean air. Maybe you can hold off everybody, but I was just surprised that there was so many different drivers throughout the race that went with that strategy. Because my game plan and my logic of thinking, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I want to, if I know that there's a possibility with 10, 15, 20 laps, whatever the case is, that there's a possibility if there's a caution that comes out, we need to put ourselves in a position that we can make the quickest pit stop and get out front and get the best position, especially if we're going to go with 2 tires. So me, I'm going to want 4 tires the whole race to make sure that I stay up there and I don't fall off because I went with 2 tires early on and have to work my way all the way through. I mean, I know it wasn't the same thing with Kurt Busch because he suffered a pit road speeding limit infraction or whatever. We're talking about those here in a second as well. But you saw how long it took him to come back through the field, and he only got back up to I think he finished 9th. I think he got up as close as maybe top 5, maybe 5th or 4th, maybe I can't remember. But you seen how hard it was to come back through. So I wouldn't want to put my driver in the position that he could possibly be too far back because we went with the 2-tire strategy early on.
Well, yeah, that's definitely a consideration. They had Goodyear brought a slightly different compound tire to the track, so that's automatically a signal to the teams to check tire wear, to figure what their tire wear is, and to know how long tires will last. They can determine all this in practice as part of a regular practice run. So a pretty good idea of what they can do there. The good thing about taking 2 tires is you can gain a lot of track position. I was trying to think of who it was, and I think it was Denny Hamlin. It picked up 11 spots by taking 2 tires instead of 4, so especially late in the race, there's definitely an advantage to it, but like I said, it can bite you. It's not a guarantee. And you combine using 2 tires instead of 4 with only putting 4, maybe 3 lug nuts on, and it's kind of a recipe for disaster then.
Oh, yeah, and like I said, I definitely agree. Late race, I wouldn't do it until the late race. After I saw everybody else and how well it fell off, I would reserve my 2-tire option until late, as late as possible if I'm going to do it, just so my driver, I know Denny Hamlin gained 11 spots for doing the 2-tire change, but when the long run went and he lost all those positions, it didn't gain nothing. You didn't really give your driver the best opportunity to be up front so you could, and I'm not speaking of Denny Hamlin because he did it early, but the other drivers that did that, what you end up in the long runs, you kind of put yourself in a predicament that if you do 2 tires later on, you're still so far back, and other drivers now are going to do it at the same time because they've done seen, and as long as they get out front, they're good. I don't know, I was just surprised that so many people did it. Pit row.
Yeah, it was pretty, especially after Denny Hamlin's run where it didn't appear to be that good after 10 laps. It was definitely a lot of other people that were trying it. And a lot of it, to me, my feeling always was when it gets later in the race, do the opposite of what the leader does. And Larry Mack talked about this. You get a late caution like that, and the leader comes in and takes 2 left side tires, I'd take 4. The leader took 4 tires, I wouldn't take but 2 right side tires. You've got to do the opposite of what the leader does that late in the race for the simple reason, you're not the fastest car out there. If you were, you'd be the leader.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you're not going to outrun the leader. You got to do something to get ahead of him.
Do you think that we've seen so many cars go with the 2-tire change because Jimmy Johnson did it and he was able to stay out front as long as he did and had a pretty strong run with it? Do you think that maybe changed some of the crew chief's perspective on that and made it where more teams were willing to give it a shot to see how strong their car would be on 2 tires?
Yeah, these crew chiefs, these guys are monitoring in their head what's going on. They know, if somebody did something different. I mean, they had a pretty good idea of who took on left side tires. 2 tires doing a particular stop. So that's going to put a bug in their brain to keep an eye on this guy and see how he does, see how he runs. And they can go back and pull up on the laptop anybody's times for any number of laps you want. So they can, if they feel like it's something working, they can double check it with the engineer and find out for sure if what they're seeing is what's really going on, and they just bookmark that information. And as the race goes on, as a crew chief, you're constantly counting down. How far have I got to go to get in my pit window? How far have I got to go to get this can be a last stop? And it's a lot of information to process if you're a crew chief. So, and there's a lot of stuff you can't get off a computer that you need to actually see, or your spotter needs to see, so he can relay the information back to you. And crew chiefs aren't sitting there watching the race. Their minds race at 100 miles a minute.
The new downforce package. It seems that the drivers are liking it. It seems that we're getting better racing. What is your opinion? So far, and we kind of talked about this before. I don't understand why people are why they're having trouble filling the stands, because 3 weeks in a row we have had excellent racing all 3 weeks across all the series. And this downforce package, to me, has been a great thing. It gives us an opportunity, in my opinion, to see who the true drivers are. I think that the other packages were, you let a lot of people go through the motions. They weren't being true drivers. But now we're getting to see, and we're seeing the difference, and seeing who can handle actually being a true driver versus those that maybe just kind of fake their way through it. That's just how I look at it. What's your opinion on this new package, and is this something that NASCAR needs to keep?
Yeah, they definitely need to keep it, and they need to fine-tune it a little bit, actually. But it's working real good. It's accomplishing what it was designed to accomplish, which is make the racing tighter, get more cars during the race, fighting for position and putting on the show, so to speak, to keep the drivers from complaining because the car's too aero and now they're getting to drive it. So that deal is definitely a win-win. And I'm glad NASCAR's pursuing it, and I think it's definitely the way to go as far as cup racing is. You cut that aero down some to where the car is not so aero dependent, and that's what they've done, but there's still a lot of aero in play. Crew chiefs knew yesterday morning that with the wind like it was, there was going to be a lot of debris blowing around the track and possibly covering the grill opening of their car. And conventional wisdom would have been to take some tape off to increase the size of the grill opening. But the hot dog wrapper is not going to change size, so if you do get one, hopefully you're not covering as much of the opening because you've got tape off as you would have been if you'd had it taped down. And that would be the safety aspect of it for the crew chief, to keep from overheating. But at the same time, if you take that strip of tape off, you're really affecting the downforce on the nose of the car. And the front downforce is what plants the tires so they'll turn. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other. If I do this, I'm giving up this. So which is going to hurt me more?
Now, this weekend we also seen an increase in pit road speeding penalties. Is this just because it was Las Vegas and since track position was so valuable? Is this the driver still getting adjusting to the dash and the new way that their NASCAR is doing the speed thing, or does NASCAR just need to do something differently instead of having these different spots and taking the Reedy did? What was the issue this weekend that we saw so many drivers get hit with a speeding violation?
I don't really know. I don't know if it was the pressure of trying not to lose position on the track during a green flag stop. Kind of, to me, with the amount of pit road penalties they had for speeding and stuff, combined with the amount of loose wheels they were experiencing during the race and loose lug nuts, I'm thinking it might have been just pressure, just, trying to do the best stop you can, trying to go as fast as you can. And, one thing or another, something happens. You notice some of the drivers, a couple that I can think of, said they were going by the lights in their tack as far as what their speed limit was, and they got caught and created problems. If you watch in the very beginning of the races, they divide the cars into two separate groups with a pace car in front of each car, and they bring them down pit road at pit road speed, and the driver can push a button and set his tack to monitor that. And when he comes on pit road, he's watching his tack, till it comes down to pit road speed before it's pit road, and he gets a green light on his tack that tells him he's all right. And the more he speeds up, he'll get one red light and two red lights, and then you're over the line. So I think it was more a combination of everybody just trying to get as much speed, pick up what they can on pit road, as opposed to fighting for it on the track.
Now, early in the race, we saw Austin Dillon's crew I forget exactly what happened, but moral of the story is Austin Dillon wasn't happy, and he let his crew chief know about it and was cussing, and you hear the crew chief trying to calm him down, and obviously later on when he got the speeding ticket down pit road, he kind of had to be quiet because now that mistake was on him. Have you ever experienced having one of your drivers cussing you out and angry on the radio? And how hard is it to, if so, how hard was it to calm them down and get them focused back on what they're supposed to be focusing on instead of worrying about what just happened?
You got to kind of look at it like, well, he's just blowing off steam. Mm-hmm. Kept calm himself down. So as a crew chief, you just got to tune it out. Let him rant, let him rave, and let him get it out of his system. Then just explain to him, what the overall picture is, what you're trying to accomplish, and go back to focusing on what we're trying to accomplish instead of what we've messed up. So, yeah, I've heard all kinds of drivers raise all kinds of holy hell over the radio, but you usually, like I said, you just kind of tune it out or don't take it personal. And at the end of the race, you get a couple of quiet minutes with the driver. Y'all talk it out then, and leave it at the track when you leave. That's about the only thing you can do.
Now, kind of the race flow. I thought that was it was interesting to watch because you knew about the time frame that the tires were going to fall off, and you were kind of waiting for the first person to dip into the pits. And it was kind of once the first person did, everybody else had to follow suit because the fall off on the tires. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed seeing the different strategies and the different teams trying to. I guess, try to kind of manipulate when everybody else pit, and I thought that was rather interesting. Being on the pit box, how aggravating is that though? When you got a game plan in your mind and you want to go this many laps just in case it's a green flag run, or to minimize any coming down the pits that you don't have to come down, but then you got other teams that make that plan change because they come down 5 laps earlier than you was expecting to, and you can't afford to keep your driver out for the extended period of time because you're losing all that valuable time on the track. How difficult is that for a crew chief to have to alter everything and not be able to continue with their game plan?
Yeah, it's something that they monitor. They know a pretty good idea what lap they're going to pit on. And if it's a green flag run and somebody takes a chance and pits early, 5 laps or so ahead of everybody else, you have to know how much faster a car is on new tires as opposed to a car with a 50-lap run on them. And this is what a lot of people that short pit are counting on, that they'll go back out and with new rubber run down the distance that they are behind the leader, decrease that distance lap after lap until that leader pits. And then he's got new tires, so he's going to be faster than you are for a while coming out of the pits until both sets of tires equal the optimum air pressure that they're running when the tire's hot. So you just you figure that in, and, it's kind of a case of good versus bad, If I can pick up 10 or 12 seconds on the leader by short pitting, then it works out pretty good. But on the other hand, if I short pit and then a caution comes out, I've lost that lap, and the only way I've got to get that lap back is to take the wave around and be stuck in the back where more squirrels, more things happen back there.
Being a team, do you want to be the one that pits 5-10 laps ahead of everybody else and gets that initial speed? Or in a race like this, would you rather let those drivers get that 5 to 10 laps in, and then you make your pit stop, and so the longer run, when it's all said and done, they're going to fall off quicker? Which one do you? And I know cautions are going to play out in this, but say it was a long green run stop, and you knew it was going to be a long green stop. Just say you had the magic power. Would it be, in your mind, as a crew chief, is it more beneficial to get that initial speed and get out there, or to let the hill come back to you and pit a little bit later?
Well, crew chiefs can kind of engineer their setup so that it's either faster on a short run from the green out to about, 15 laps when the tires get up to temperature, and then your speed starts to fall off, as opposed to being set up for a long green flag run where you give up a little bit to somebody else when your tires are new, but then when they get up to the operating temperature and operating air pressure, that fall off moves out and you become real steady. And the advantage to that is when you're running steady in a green flag run, if your setup's good, you don't have to chase anybody down so much as you just let them fall back to you as their car falls off and yours stays better. So it really, then again, you got to kind of look at it as to how you're set up, whether you're set up for short runs or long runs, and the fact, you've got to do, when the opportunity presents itself, you got to do different than the leader to get to the front. So you're figuring that in too. If you see the leader short pit to get possible, catch a car, and then that would put the leader down, and there might be 2 or 3 cars that hadn't pit that'll suddenly be up in the front, and then the leader falls a lap down under that type of situation, that pit strategy. Then he's got to take the wave around, and that puts him at the back of the pack and puts him farther away from you if you're up in the front.
Now, I think the two things when the race was said and done that stuck out to me was, one, we had a lot of the same familiar faces up front, but with a mixture of young talent. I was really impressed. Chase Elliott, until he got wrapped up in someone else's garbage. Ryan Blaney, Austin Dillon, those guys were up front and insisted. It wasn't, a fluke. And even Austin Dillon went to the rear, if I'm not mistaken. Well, obviously because of the pit road speeding, but it wasn't as bad because he was. There was a lot of cars down at that point in time, and just a lot of slower traffic. But these three guys these three drivers were very consistent in running up front a lot. Austin and Blaney and Chase Elliott, I would say almost the top 10 all day, except for Austin Dillon's one blimp and screw up, in the crew the crew's screw up, but he got back up there. How impressed was you with these young drivers and the consistency that they showed at this track that wasn't that easy for a lot of veteran drivers?
Well, I was impressed. They had good runs and everything, and they are showing a lot of promise, and they look like the future of our sport. But factor in one thing: who do they drive for? They're driving for, some of the top teams in NASCAR.
Mm-hmm.
So they're getting the benefit of engineering help, better equipment, better team, and everything, just because of who their background's with. But there's plenty of young talent in the top 3 series that are ready to take over as these older drivers retire. You look at Stuart Haas. They know Tony's going to be retiring. They made their plans, so you got to look toward the future into what the future is going to bring as far as drivers and everything. And like I said, you look back to the Xfinity and Camping World Series, there's a ton of good young drivers there, motivated and ready to take over.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, the biggest thing I took from that race yesterday is in the late stages of the race, Joey Logano earned a lot of respect in the garage by not falling over and letting Brad Keselowski go to catch Kyle Busch. He raced him hard,
mm-hmm.
lap after lap after lap, not wanting to give up that position. And he proved, doesn't matter if you're my teammate or not, I'm not going to lay over and let you go by me. You want to pass me, you're going to have to earn it just like everybody else. And I think with Joey's reputation and everything, I think that helped him gain some respect in the garage. And I was glad to see it. And it didn't really affect the outcome of the race or anything, so it turned out no harm, no foul. But Logano definitely sent a message to the other drivers about how he races.
I got 2 questions, and you brought up two different interesting points that I wanted to bring up, and I'm trying to remember the second one now. I can remember the first one. Okay, I remember the other one now. First, you talk about the Tony Stewart and getting ready to retire, and they already got his replacement, and talking about Clint Boyer. how difficult do you think it is for Clint Boyer to just be riding in a ride to be riding? They've yet found what they need to put that 15 car even really in the top 15. And it just seems like this is just one of those years, unfortunately, for Clint Boyer that I'm not going to say it's a waste, but it kind of is because you're not going to make the chase. And well, I'm not going to say you're not. It'll take a lot of luck for that team to make the chase, but
Yeah.
your competitor. It's got to be tearing him up to be mid-pack, mid to farther back. I would say anywhere from I don't know, about 20 to 30 kind of top or finish kind of car. That's got to be aggravating, especially for a competitor. And then also how I'm not gonna say nervous, but do you think it added any pressure when we watch Matt Kenseth and Joey Logano race side by side for as long as they are? For Matt Kenseth, knowing that all eyes are on Matt Kenseth right now, and with just coming off that probation and all that stuff going on, do you think that added possibly any pressure for the driver, knowing that, okay, you can't do anything to screw this up, because NASCAR more than likely is going to just assume that you still got bad blood and you intentionally probably finished Logano's day?
Damn, did I lose you?
No, I thought maybe I lost you. You got quiet. You still there?
You're breaking up. I can hear some of what you're saying. Well, let me reply to what you were saying. Damn it! Now I forgot the gist of the conversation because I got thrown off by the phone going bad.
Clint Boyer. The first part was Clint Boyer, and this kind of being a wasted season for him.
Yeah, it's still doing it.
Can you hear me?
Damn it, Blog Talk Radio.
We're actually on Spreaker tonight. Not even on Blog Talk. But hey, can you hear me now? It might be at his end, because I'm still on full bars. And I ain't moved. I got my phone stuck one spot. What we'll do is I'll go ahead and hang up, and we'll wait for him to call back. Maybe that'll entice him to come back if he's no longer on the other end, because I don't know if it was my end or not. We'll give him a second to call back here, and if not, we'll finish up the talking about this weekend at Las Vegas. I honestly think that was not my end, though. I honestly think. Because I've been sitting in the exact same spot. And I'm like right in the city. I can see if it was back in the day when I wasn't in the city. There we go. Let's see what happens here. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
The first part was the Clint Boyer thing.
Yeah.
How aggravated does it got to be for Clint Boyer to be the competitor he is, and basically knowing this season is kind of a waste, and another year that's taken away from your career, that you're just kind of sitting there waiting for an open opportunity and move to a team that's actually competitive.
Yeah, it's like I was thinking that yesterday when I see the leaderboard and see how far back Clint was running. It's going to be kind of a whole year of him biting his tongue and just telling himself, it's only 1 year, it's only 1 year, it's only 1 year. So I don't know if he expected this or not when he made the change. I'm sure he thought they'd be more competitive than they are. So, right now, at this time and place, it doesn't look like a good move for Clint, but next year it might look like the best move in the last 10 years. So we'll wait and see, but it's going to be a very trying year for Clint Boyer.
Now, I forget what the other direction I went with it. What the other part of that was, and if I remember before, I remember now. Matt Kenseth, when him and Logano were battling there for quite a few laps, side by side, does that add any pressure to, I would say, Matt Kenseth at all, if any pressure was added at all, just knowing that all eyes were on Matt Kenseth, that he pretty much could not do anything to slip up, to cause a wreck, knowing that if he ends up taking out Logano, it's going to look like, that he's still not gotten over what happened last year.
Yeah, if he had any thoughts, he would have had to realize, I've got to make this look like an accident. I can't afford to be on NASCAR's bad side again. So I think there was some pressure there, but mostly the same kind of pressure, but different kind of pressure, too. Logano knew if anything happened, it was going to be hollered that he was retaliating for last year and everything. And if something happened on Matt's end, it was going to be, well, he didn't learn, or he hadn't felt like he's got the right payback or anything. So I think they're racing side by side, and Matt's got a bit of a smile on his face because he's kind of in the catbird seat. And I'm wondering if when he got by Logano, if he waved at him or gave him the finger or some kind of signal to let him know he was thinking about him.
Now, we have a 1-2 finish for Penske. Their cars were strong all day, but their strength at the end of the race, was that how strong the Penske cars really were, or was that more of a product of pit strategy and the other cars just falling off? Jimmy Johnson, he was strong for most of the day. Kyle Busch had his nice, 38 laps out front. Kurt Busch had worked his way all the way back up to finish ninth. So we had some strong cars. And I don't think that Brad Keselowski and Joe Logano were dominating cars. But when we got to the end of the race, they looked pretty impressive. Like I said, was those cars that impressive, or was it more of just happened to be the pit strategies that went on and it worked out in their favor and their tires were fresher?
No, I think it's definitely the team. I think Penske has developed their whole team into being one of the strongest teams out there. Definitely in the top three. Mm-hmm. And they've got all their crap together. They've got engineering working, they've got good setups, they got good motors, they got good drivers that are communicating well, they got everything they could want really out of a team. And then with Logano racing Bad Brad so hard at the end of the race last year, that's a bonus. That lets you know that, and especially today, it's usually on Tuesday that they have the driver crew chief meetings where they discuss what happened this past race and what they're going to do in the next race. And I'm sure there wasn't any animosity between the two drivers. Mm-hmm. So that's always a good sign, too. But it's just that Penske has developed a very good race team and will probably be a good race team for quite a while. And I'm sure there's people like Chip Ganassi, whose two drivers aren't doing much so far this year, that are looking at the Penske way of doing things and trying to steal some ideas or get an idea of what they're doing that makes them so good consistently race after race.
Now, Ryan Blaney and the Wood Brothers, obviously affiliates of Penske Racing with the top 6 finish, so 1-2-6, and you got to talk or listen to Ryan Blaney in his interview. Congratulate those guys. So obviously, what they have going on is not only just affecting Penske directly, but the teams that have, they've reached out to. How good was it for you, especially someone who's been around the sport so long, to not only see the Wood Brothers back for a full-time ride this year, but to see them with a young driver and being effective and having good runs?
Well, I'm glad for the Wood Brothers because they're, such an institution in NASCAR. They've been through the whole deal, and they supported the sport. So I'm glad to see them running good, glad to see them running up front, and hope the season turns out well for them. But over the years, the Wood Brothers' forte has been to dominate big races and not worry about the small tracks, not run for the points or anything, run for the money. And I just wonder, with the lack of short track experience and road course experience that the team has, how they're going to do on those tracks. So that's going to be the first test for me, will be to see how the Wood Brothers do on the short track.
Now, I got two questions that I want to wrap this up with, and this is more of things that have happened over the last 2 weeks, and we didn't have a show last week due to me moving. And so I left them for the end. I left them so it didn't have to be nothing long. And I didn't really want, especially this first topic, I didn't really want to go into in depth, and for obvious reasons. I'm not trying to get us into a political conversation or a political debate. I am more interested in your opinion. Should NASCAR, or especially the man that runs NASCAR, should he have any political commitments to anybody, or basically saying that, NASCAR is any political endorsing? That's the word I'm looking for. To me, with America being the way it is, your personal life, especially as a CEO or a founder or anything, your personal life is your personal life, and your company is your company. And so what you do, what you believe, who you're going to vote for, I believe that should be discussed between you, your wife, or your husband, or your significant other, maybe your family and your close friends, in conversation. It don't even need to be discussed. If you want to have a conversation about it. But when it comes to work, especially religion and politics, those are two things that you don't involve your company, your business, your sport, or anything in my opinion. Was that a good move, bad move? Should be left alone? Like I said, I don't want to get in the whole political debate. I just want to know your opinion when it comes to Brian France saying what he did, endorsing Donald Trump and kind of putting NASCAR kind of center of attention with this whole political stuff going on.
Well, it's just like you said, there's two things you don't talk about, and that's religion and politics. And for Brian France, especially in his position, it doesn't quite come out as I'm Brian France and I support Donald Trump. To a lot of people, it looks like NASCAR is saying, we support Donald Trump. And that's the wrong message to send. I mean, there's just because it's Donald Trump makes it a little bit more noticeable, but people are really divided about his presidency. Strongly divided as to whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. And for Brian France to come out and say, I support Donald Trump, well, the people that don't support Donald Trump might look at that in a bad way and say, well, same old thing. I'm not following NASCAR anymore because he supports Trump. But there is the possibility of taking butts out of the seats instead of putting butts in the seats.
Yes.
So, I don't think he should have made the statement. I don't think anybody in that position that
Agreed.
has a large reputation. Chick-fil-A is kind of another example of how that works. Their owner is really religious, and they follow a lot of strict rules about working on Sundays and things like that. But every now and then he'll come out with a statement where he supports same-sex marriages or something of that nature, and it doesn't blow up in his face, but there's a lot of negative feedback to it. So I think Brian France should have took that into consideration before he announced his support for Trump.
Most definitely agree. I don't know. I just feel that your personal religious and political views, that really has no impact on the company, and so that should be left to your personal life, and only what reflects your employees and what reflects your drivers or your athletes, whatever your business is, that should be the only thing you should be focused on and making public. Everything else should be personal, and that's just the way I feel. The other big thing that came out over the last couple weeks was Stewart-Haas Racing going to Ford. A couple questions. One, how shocked was you? Two, how much of a change is that? And three, for drivers like Tony Stewart, I think that's the biggest thing that surprised me, because he had his, I guess, dissatisfaction when he found out Joe Gibbs Racing was going over to Toyota, and that he was a Chevy man. And you got a couple of drivers in the stable that, notably are Chevy drivers. How difficult of a decision is that to make? And I know that Tony Stewart talked about they like the future, what Ford has in plan, but Ford ain't won a championship since, I want to say 2002, if I remember my stats correctly. I know it's early 2000. So this is not a manufacturer that's produced a champion in a while now anyway. How do you go from a manufacturer that we've seen won multiple championships recently to one we ain't seen in a while and say, you know what, we like what Ford's doing and we like the direction they're going, when outside of the Penske team, there really isn't nothing going on with Ford's?
Well, that right there would motivate Stewart-Haas Racing to be successful with the switch and to build themselves up and hopefully get on equal footing with Penske. As far as how difficult the change is, nothing to it. It's all dependent on how big a check Ford wanted to write. These cars are built, Stewart-Haas gets their chassis from Hendrick Motorsports. Well, Hendrick Motorsports, the chassis they build, they'll fit, anybody will fit on them. Everybody pretty much has a standard chassis and just basically different body mounting points and the length of the points to keep the panels off things like the roll bars and the tires and stuff is really the only difference in the cars itself as far as whose manufacturer you're running and everything. Motors are another thing, but they're all pretty much equal. And Penske's not having any motor problems or horsepower problems, so there doesn't seem to be any downside there. It's just, how big a check did Ford want to write to get a top-notch team? That's the thing. I think Ford has looked at Roush as not being at the top of the Ford stable. They're more middle or down below, so Ford's looking for something to expose their brand more and everything by running up front. And so Ford had a plan. They were going to buy somebody. They were going to get a top-notch organization one way or the other. They would have wrote a big enough check to get Joe Gibbs Racing back in a Ford. They would have spent what they needed to spend, but they were going to get a successful top-notch team and convert it to a Ford team. and it worked for Penske.
Oh, yeah.
So, Penske came off the Drivers' Championship and switched to Ford the very next year. And they've done all right. So you look at all the outside factors and you figure Stewart-Haas really isn't losing anything other than the engineering and technical help, really, from Hendrick Motorsports, simply because having an alliance, it gave them 8 teams working together at the racetrack. So any problem comes up, you got 8 different teams looking at it with a different point of view and giving you information on how to fix that problem. And they're going to lose on that. They're definitely going to lose some input. But as far as on the track, I don't see anything changing there.
Was you shocked?
Yep. Yep, because Tony Stewart has said for so many years that he's a Chevy man. And, Chevy's where his heart is and everything, but when it comes down to it, it's not where your heart is, it's where your pocketbook is.
Exactly. Well, that hour comes up really quick when you're having a great conversation. And, Steve, you definitely hit on everything that I was curious about. There was a lot of things this weekend. And
let me touch on one more thing.
Okay.
The Xfinity race on Saturday, Kyle Busch led 199 out of 200 laps. It was definitely a snoozer. And I honestly didn't expect Kyle Busch to make it through post-race inspection, or to even not have any inspection problems Sunday, because that's NASCAR's way of getting the payback. I know NASCAR was not happy. He stunk up their show pretty bad, and when you stink up the show on NASCAR is going to get a payback. And we used to call it back in the day a Chinese fire drill. That they will run you ragged, making you fix the tiniest little things. Something that was a couple of tenths of an inch off before that Xfinity race. Well, in the post-race inspection, 1/1000th of an inch was going to get you dropped. So, and I'm still looking for something from NASCAR toward Kyle Busch and his team for the way they ran Saturday and just put everybody to sleep.
Yeah, so those Joe Gibbs racing and Kyle Busch racing cars, good God almighty. Definitely can't wait until next week. Can't wait till we sit down here and talk about Phoenix. Phoenix has produced a lot of great races. Of course, I think always the Clint Boyer and Jeff Gordon garage fight will always kind of stick out my mind for Phoenix. But definitely excited about next week and seeing how these cars act at Phoenix and see what the tires are going to do. And just another week. I'm sorry, outside of this Xfinity Series race that was a snoozer, we've seen a lot of great racing in the first 3 weeks, and I expect nothing less next weekend, and just looking forward to be able to sit down here next week and do this again.
Definitely so. I think it's going to be a great race Sunday. Might be the time Kevin Harvick lets everybody know that their team hasn't lost anything. They're going to be as strong as they have been in the past 2 years. And there's a lot of good drivers in there that have run good at Phoenix and are capable of winning at Phoenix. So I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a great show.
Before we jump off here, I want you to plug Thursday night show. I don't know if you got any guests or not, but at least let them know where to be, what time to be Thursday night. Then also plug the Facebook group that we can get a lot more of NASCAR and racing talk, period.
Yeah, Thursday night it's going to be Me on Racing with Big Sweat. I've got 2 drivers lined up, and I'm looking to get a third. Jay Edgecock, who's driven race modifieds, asphalt open wheel modifieds, but he's really known as being one of the premier late model chassis builders in the South. So we're going to get to talk to him, and we're going to talk with a young driver named Mark Stewart from up in New York, who's racing up there and looking to move his way up. So, as always, it's going to be a great show Thursday night, 9 o'clock. Be there. It'll well be worth sitting in on. And my NASCAR group, NASCAR and Other Racing, we run a race thread through all the televised races where group members will get on there and converse back and forth online, let them know how they feel about what this driver did or that driver did or what NASCAR did. Just good open discussion. So you need to come join that. Yesterday's race, our race thread generated over 850 comments during the race. So it's a lot of people there talking, and if you want to join in, just join the group, NASCAR and Other Racing. We'll be glad to have you.
Definitely a great group. I love being able to be part of those threads and just watch it and get everybody's point of views. It's always fun to sit there and do that. Don't forget, you guys can check the 110 Nation out on Facebook, 110 Nation Sports. You can check me out on Facebook as well, Mr. CJ Sports. Check us out on Twitter at 110 Nation and myself at CJ Sports 1. For those that are listening to this and want to tune in later on tonight, we got the 110 Nation Sports Show, 9 o'clock. We got Hannah Newhouse joining us at 9:30. Looking forward to having her on the show again. Rubbins Racing back next Monday night. Can't wait for it. And, Steve, you have a great week.
You too, CJ. I'll be talking to you Thursday night.
Yes, sir. Everybody have a great night.